Ethan Cole made exactly one mistake that October morning in Boston. He climbed into the wrong black car. Soaking wet, broke, late for the interview that could save his daughter's future, he didn't check the driver's face. He just talked. About overdue rent, about Maya's granola bar tucked in his pocket, about being one bad day away from losing everything. The woman behind the wheel said nothing. She just drove. When they stopped in front of the glass tower where his interview waited, she finally turned around. And Ethan realized he'd just poured his entire broken life out to the CEO, who was about to decide his fate. If you want to see how one wrong car changed everything, stay until the end. Hit like and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. The rain hit Boston like it had a personal grudge. Ethan Cole stood under the broken awning outside his apartment building, watching water pour off the edge in sheets, and wondered if the universe was actively trying to ruin him. His phone said 8:47 a.m. The interview started at 9:30. The subway was down again. Every rideshare app on his phone showed little cartoon cars circling nowhere useful, prices surging into fantasy territory. He had $17 in his checking account. He checked again because sometimes banks made mistakes. Still $17. "Daddy?" He turned. Maya stood in the doorway behind him, still in her pajamas, holding the granola bar she'd insisted he take. She was 6. Her hair was tangled from sleep. She had no idea how close they were to the edge. "You're going to be late," she said. "I know, baby. You said this one's important." "It is." She walked over and pressed the granola bar into his hand. Peanut butter chocolate chip. The expensive kind he never bought anymore. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. "Saved it for my lunch last week. For good luck." Something cracked open in his chest. He knelt down and kissed the top of her head, smelling the strawberry shampoo Mrs. Kim from downstairs had given them when their own ran out. "You're supposed to eat your lunch, Maya. You're supposed to get the job." He stood up, slipping the granola bar into his suit pocket. The suit was 4 years old, bought for a life that felt like someone else's now. The left shoulder seam was starting to split. He'd ironed it 3 times last night, trying to make it look like he had his life together. "I'll be back by afternoon. Mrs. Kim's going to check on you at lunch, okay?" "I know the rules, Daddy." "I know you do." He kissed her head again, then stepped out into the rain before he could change his mind. The rideshare app still showed nothing. He started walking toward the main street, jacket over his head, shoes already soaked through. 2 blocks down, he saw it. A black sedan idling at the curb, hazards on. He didn't think. He just ran. He yanked the back door open and fell inside, water dripping everywhere. "Thank God," he gasped. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic was—" "You're not late." The voice came from the driver's seat, a woman's voice, low and calm, with an accent he couldn't place. Vaguely European, maybe. Expensive sounding. Ethan blinked water out of his eyes and looked up. She was watching him in the rear-view mirror. Dark hair pulled back, sharp features, eyes that didn't miss anything. He fumbled for his phone, checking the rideshare app. No active rides. You thought I was your driver. Aren't you?" "No." He should have gotten out, apologized, walked away. But the rain was still hammering the roof and he was already 15 minutes behind. And something about the way she said no didn't sound angry, just factual. "I can pay you," he said, knowing it was a lie. "I've got an interview at 9:30. Downtown. The big glass building on Cross Logistics." He stared at her. "How did you—" "The folder on your lap says Cross Logistics in 2-inch letters." He looked down. She was right. The portfolio he'd bought at a dollar store, now spotted with rain. "Yeah," he said. "That one. If you could just— I know this is weird, but I'm really— Put your seatbelt on. You'll drive me? I'm going there anyway." She pulled into traffic before he could answer. Ethan sat back, heart still pounding, trying to figure out what had just happened. The car was immaculate. Leather seats, no air freshener, but it smelled faintly of coffee and something clean and understated. Classical music played quietly through the speakers. "Thank you," he said. "Seriously, you have no idea what this— You're nervous." "Is it that obvious? You've checked your phone 4 times in 30 seconds. He looked at the phone in his hand. She was right. He shoved it in his pocket. Sorry, big interview, big company. I really need this. She said nothing. I mean, everyone needs a job, right? But I really need this one. My daughter. He stopped himself. Strangers didn't care about Maya. Anyway, I appreciate the ride. What's the role? Operations analyst, entry level. It's nothing fancy, but the pay it's good. Better than good. And they've got health care and the hours are stable and my daughter needs stable right now. How old is she? 6. Her name's Maya. He stopped again, but the woman was still watching him in the mirror, waiting. She's the reason I'm doing this. Any of this. Where's her mother? The question landed like a fist. Ethan looked out the window, watching the rain-blurred city slide past. Not in the picture, he said finally. I see. It's just us. Has been for 3 years, which is fine. We're fine. But things got tight after I lost my last job and I've been freelancing, but it's not enough. And the rent keeps going up and Maya's school has fees for everything. And He realized he was rambling. Sorry, you didn't ask for my life story. You're telling it anyway. Yeah, I do that when I'm nervous. Talk too much. I've noticed. The car slowed at a red light. The woman glanced at him in the mirror again, and for a second Ethan thought he saw something almost amused in her expression. What's your background? She asked. Supply chain, logistics. I've got a degree in industrial engineering, but I've been out of the formal market for a while. Took care of Maya when she was little. Freelanced. Did consulting work when I could. It's been a rough couple years. Why Cross Logistics? Why not? They're one of the biggest. They've got a reputation for innovation. I read about the restructuring they did last year, the efficiency gains. It's impressive. You researched the company. Of course I researched the company. I need this job. Most people don't research. Most people aren't as desperate as I am. The light turned green. The woman drove in silence for a block, then said, What do you know about their current challenges? Ethan sat forward slightly. The warehouse system's a mess. They've been scaling too fast, distribution delays, inventory errors. I read an article last month that said they're bleeding money on redundant shipments. If I were them, I'd audit the entire tracking protocol, cross-reference with vendor delivery windows, and rebuild the relay points from scratch. That's a significant overhaul. It's a significant problem. And you think you could solve it? I think someone needs to. Might as well be me. She didn't answer. The car turned onto a wide avenue, and suddenly the skyline opened up in front of them, glass towers climbing into the gray sky. At the center of it all, taller than the rest, was a building Ethan recognized from the company website, Cross Logistics headquarters. His stomach dropped. This is it, he said quietly. The woman pulled up to the front entrance, smooth and precise, like she'd done it 1,000 times. She shifted into park but didn't turn around. Good luck, she said. Thank you. Really. I owe you. He fumbled for the door handle. Can I don't know, buy you coffee sometime? To say thanks? I know that sounds stupid, but you're going to be late. Right. Yeah, sorry. He pushed the door open and stepped out into the rain. Then he leaned back in, because his mother had raised him to say thank you properly. I mean it. You saved me today. The woman looked at him for the first time without the mirror between them. Her eyes were gray, sharp, and something in them made his heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with the interview. Go, she said. He went. The lobby of Cross Logistics was everything Ethan expected. Polished marble floors, minimalist furniture, a reception desk the size of his entire apartment. He stood dripping on the floor mat, trying to look professional while water pooled around his shoes. The receptionist glanced at him with the kind of polite disdain reserved for people who show up soaked and desperate. Ethan Cole, he said, I have an interview at 9:30. She typed something into her computer. 11th floor. HR will meet you at the elevator. Thank you. He stepped into the elevator, watched the doors close, and let himself breathe for the first time in an hour. His reflection in the polished steel doors looked worse than he'd hoped. Hair plastered to his forehead, tie slightly crooked, the suit jacket clinging to his shoulders. He straightened the tie. It didn't help. The elevator opened on 11, and a woman in a crisp blazer smiled at him with the kind of professional warmth that meant nothing. Mr. Cole? That's me? I'm Jennifer. HR coordinator. Thanks for coming in. If you'll follow me. She led him down a hallway lined with glass-walled offices. People moved purposefully, heads down, phones pressed to their ears. The whole floor hummed with efficiency. Jennifer stopped at a conference room and opened the door. They'll be with you in just a moment. Water? Coffee? Water's fine, thank you. She disappeared and Ethan sat down at the long table, setting his damp portfolio in front of him. The room overlooked the city. From up here, the rain looked almost beautiful. He pulled out Maya's granola bar and set it on the table. For luck. The door opened. 3 people walked in. 2 men in suits, 1 woman in a charcoal dress. They introduced themselves. Names Ethan immediately forgot, titles he didn't. Director of Operations, Senior Analyst, VP of something hyphenated. They sat down across from him. Thanks for coming in, Mr. Cole, the VP said. She had the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. We've reviewed your resume. Impressive background, though, I'll be honest, the employment gap raises some questions. I took time to raise my daughter, Ethan said. Her mother left when she was 3. It was the right choice. Admirable, but this role requires someone who's current on industry trends. Logistics has changed significantly in 3 years. I'm aware. I've stayed current through consulting work, case studies, independent projects. I know the landscape. Can you give us an example? Ethan opened his portfolio, pulling out a single printed page. It was a diagram he'd drawn 2 nights ago, sitting at his kitchen table while Maya slept. A proposed redesign of a theoretical distribution network. This is a model I worked on last month. Hypothetical company, real problems, overlapping shipment zones, inefficient relay points, vendor delays causing inventory pileup. I redesigned the hub structure, consolidated 3 distribution centers into 1 central location, and rerouted the delivery schedule to cut transit time by 30%. The 3 interviewers leaned forward. Where did you get the data? The operations director asked. Publicly available shipping reports, industry analysis, some educated guesses. This is solid work. Thank you. The woman in the charcoal dress, the VP, studied the diagram for a long moment. Then she looked up at him. Let me ask you something, Mr. Cole. If you were brought into a failing system tomorrow, what's the first thing you'd do? Listen, Ethan said without hesitation. Everyone wants to fix things immediately. Tear it all down, rebuild from scratch. But you can't fix what you don't understand. I'd spend the first week just watching, listening to the people on the ground, the warehouse workers, the drivers, the dispatchers. They know where the problems are. They just don't always know how to articulate them. Once I understood the real bottlenecks, then I'd act. And what if you don't have a week? Then I'd prioritize. Stop the bleeding first. Find the one failure point that's cascading into everything else. Fix that. Then move to the next. The VP sat back, exchanging a glance with the 2 men. We actually have a situation like that right now, she said slowly. Our eastern warehouse has been hemorrhaging inventory for 2 months. Missing shipments, duplicates, delays. We've had 3 consultants look at it. No one solved it. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Can I ask what they recommended? New software, more staff, better vendor contracts. And none of it worked? No. Because those are surface fixes, Ethan said. You're treating symptoms, not the disease. So what's the disease? I don't know. I'd have to see the warehouse. The room went quiet. Then the operations director laughed. Not unkindly, just surprised. You want to see the warehouse. If you're serious about solving the problem, yes. The VP leaned forward. We're interviewing 5 candidates today, Mr. Cole. You're the only one who's asked to see the actual site. Then I'm the only one who wants to fix it. Another silence. Then the VP stood. Come with me. 20 minutes later, Ethan was standing in a warehouse the size of an airplane hangar, watching controlled chaos unfold around him. Forklifts beeped. Workers shouted. Boxes moved on conveyor belts that seemed to lead nowhere useful. The operations director stood beside him, arms crossed, looking resigned. This is the heart of the problem, he said. Inventory goes in, inventory goes out, but somewhere in between it gets lost. Ethan walked slowly down the main aisle, watching. A forklift driver nearly hit a stack of pallets. A supervisor yelled at someone holding a tablet. At the far end, a group of workers stood around a pile of boxes, arguing. He stopped at a workstation where a woman was scanning packages. Her scanner beeped red 3 times in a row. "What's wrong?" he asked. She glanced at him, annoyed. "Who are you?" "Someone trying to help. What's wrong with the scanner?" "It keeps saying the SKU doesn't match the shipment, but I packed this myself. I know it's right." Ethan looked at the label, then at the box, then at the tablet mounted to the workstation. "The SKU's right," he said, "but the lot number's wrong." "What?" "Your system's reading lot numbers as SKUs. Someone changed the input field in the scanning software, probably during the last update." The woman stared at him. "How do you—" "Check your other errors. I bet they're all lot number mismatches." She pulled up her tablet, scrolling fast. Her face went pale. "He's right," she called to the supervisor. "It's the lot numbers, every single one." The supervisor came over, and Ethan explained it again. Within minutes, they'd called in the IT lead. Within 10 minutes, they'd confirmed it. A software patch 2 months ago had swapped 2 input fields. Every scan since then had been logging incorrect data. The VP, who'd been watching from the doorway, walked over slowly. "You just solved a 2-month problem in 15 minutes, she said. "I got lucky," Ethan said. "I was looking for something simple. Everyone else was looking for something complicated." "That's not luck, that's instinct." She turned to the operations director. "Hire him." The man blinked. "Right now?" "Right now." She looked at Ethan. "You start Monday. We'll discuss salary and title later, but I can promise you it's more than entry level." Ethan's brain went blank. What?" "You're hired, Mr. Cole, unless you'd like to negotiate." No, Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This company has 100 problems like this one. If you're as good as I think you are, you're about to have a very long year." She walked away, heels clicking on the concrete, already talking into her phone. Ethan stood there, surrounded by boxes and forklifts and people who suddenly looked at him like he mattered. He pulled out his phone and texted Maya. "I got it." 3 seconds later, she replied, "I knew you would." He smiled, slipping the phone back into his pocket. Then he felt the granola bar, still wrapped, still waiting. He decided to save it. Ethan spent the rest of the day in a blur of paperwork, handshakes, and names he'd have to memorize later. Jennifer from HR walked him through benefits, direct deposit, start date logistics. Someone from IT gave him a laptop and a security badge with his photo, taken in a hallway with terrible lighting. By 3 p.m., he was standing outside the building again, still half convinced he'd imagined the whole thing. His phone buzzed. A calendar invite. Onboarding meeting. Monday, 8 a.m. Executive floor. Executive floor. He laughed out loud, alone on the sidewalk. Then he started walking toward the subway, jacket over his head again, rain still falling but lighter now. The city looked different. The same buildings, same streets, but brighter somehow. Like someone had turned the contrast up. He stopped at a bodega and bought Maya her favorite candy, gummy bears, the good kind. It cost $3 he didn't have yesterday, but today he had a job. Today, he had a future. When he got home, Maya was sitting at the kitchen table drawing. Mrs. Kim was washing dishes. "Daddy!" Maya jumped up and ran to him. He scooped her up, spinning her once. "Guess what?" "You got it." "I got it." "I told you the granola bar was lucky." He set her down and pulled the candy from his pocket. Her eyes went wide. "No way." "Way." She tore it open immediately, and Mrs. Kim smiled from the kitchen. "I'm proud of you, Ethan," she said quietly. "Thank you for watching her." "Anytime. She's a good girl." After Mrs. Kim left, Ethan sat on the couch with Maya curled against him, half the gummy bears already gone. She told him about her day. He told her about the warehouse, the broken scanner, the way the VP had said hire him like it was the easiest decision in the world. "Are we going to be okay now?" Maya asked. "Yeah, baby, we're going to be okay." "Promise?" "Promise." She fell asleep against his shoulder an hour later, and Ethan sat there in the quiet apartment, feeling the weight of her against him, the weight of the day, the weight of everything that had almost gone wrong and somehow went right instead. He thought about the woman in the car, the one who'd driven him when she didn't have to. He still didn't know her name. He thought about the way she'd asked questions, the way she'd listened, the way her eyes had looked in the mirror. He'd probably never see her again. That was fine. He didn't need to. She'd already given him more than she knew. He kissed the top of Maya's head and carried her to bed. Monday came fast. Ethan stood outside Cross Logistics headquarters at 7:45, coffee in hand, badge clipped to his belt. The lobby felt different now. He belonged here. Jennifer met him at the elevators again. "Big day," she said brightly. "You'll be meeting the full operations team, department heads, some of the senior leadership." "Sounds good. And later this afternoon, you'll meet Ms. Cross herself." Ethan paused. "Ms. Cross?" "Vivian Cross, founder and CEO. She likes to meet all new hires personally. Well, not all, just the ones she's interested in." "She's interested in me?" "You solved a problem 3 consultants couldn't. Yeah, she's interested." The elevator doors opened on the executive floor, and Ethan stepped into a world of glass walls, modern art, and people who looked like they'd never missed a mortgage payment in their lives. Jennifer led him down a hallway to a large corner office. The door was open. "Ms. Cross, this is Ethan Cole, your 8 a.m. Ethan stepped inside, hand extended, ready to introduce himself. Then he froze. The woman behind the desk looked up from her laptop. Dark hair, sharp features, gray eyes. It was her, the driver, the woman from the car. She smiled, and it wasn't warm. It was something sharper, something that said she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Hello, Mr. Cole," Vivian Cross said. "Shall we begin?" Ethan's hand hung in the air between them, suspended in the kind of silence that makes seconds feel like hours. Vivian Cross looked at it, then at him, and something flickered across her face too fast to read. Amusement, maybe. Or calculation. She stood, reached across the desk, and shook his hand once. Her grip was firm, brief, professional. "Sit down, Mr. Cole." He sat. His brain was still trying to catch up, replaying every stupid thing he'd said in that car. The overdue rent. Maya's granola bar. The desperation he'd worn like a second skin. She'd heard all of it. She'd known exactly who he was the whole time. "You're wondering why I didn't tell you," Vivian said, settling back into her chair. She wore a navy suit today, perfectly tailored, and her hair was down instead of pulled back. It changed her face somehow, made her look younger. "In the car," the thought crossed my mind. "I wanted to see who you were when you didn't think it mattered." "And?" "You talked too much, but you were honest." "Great, I rambled my way into a job." "You solved a 2-month problem in 15 minutes. The rambling was just context." Ethan leaned back in his chair, trying to find his footing. "So this is what? A test? See if the guy who cried about his bills in your back seat can actually do the work?" "No, this is me deciding if you're worth the risk." "What risk?" "I don't hire people lightly, Mr. Cole, especially not people I pull off the street. You got this job because you saw something 3 consultants missed, but one good call doesn't make a career. I need to know if you can do it again." "So, give me another problem." She smiled then, just barely. "I intend to." She opened her laptop, turned it around, and slid it across the desk. On the screen was a spreadsheet that looked like someone had taken a functioning system and run it through a blender. "Our Midwest distribution network," she said. 6 hubs, 12 warehouses, inventory tracking that hasn't synced properly in 3 months. We're losing shipments, duplicating orders, and hemorrhaging money. I've had analysts working on this since August. No one can figure out where the breakdown is. Ethan leaned forward, scanning the columns. Numbers that didn't add up. Routes that overlapped. Timestamps that made no sense. "Can I see the original routing protocol?" he asked. Vivian pulled up another file. "This was the system we used 2 years ago. It worked, then we scaled. And didn't update the infrastructure to match." "Correct." Ethan studied both spreadsheets, letting the pattern settle. His brain had always worked like this, finding order in chaos, seeing the shape of things other people missed. It was the one thing he'd been genuinely good at, the one thing that hadn't fallen apart when everything else did. "Your relay points are wrong," he said after a minute. "You're routing shipments through hubs that made sense when you had half the volume. Now you're bottlenecking in 3 locations and creating redundant paths everywhere else. The tracking system isn't broken. It's just trying to log shipments moving through routes that don't exist anymore." Vivian watched him, expression unreadable. Recommended fix? Consolidate the relay points. Cut 2 of the hubs entirely. Redistribute the load across the remaining 4. Rebuild the tracking schema to match the new paths. It'll take a week to implement, but it'll cut your transit time by 20% and eliminate the duplication errors. Which 2 hubs? Kansas City and Columbus. They're redundant. Everything they handle can be absorbed by Indianapolis and St. Louis without adding significant time. She pulled the laptop back, typing something quickly. Then she looked up at him. I had a consulting firm give me the same recommendation 3 weeks ago. Took them a month and $60,000 to figure it out. You did it in 5 minutes. So I'm right? You're right. Do I get $60,000? She almost smiled again. You get to keep your job. For now. Ethan sat back, feeling the adrenaline start to fade. You really do test everyone like this, don't you? Only the ones I think might be worth something? And if I'd gotten it wrong? Then you'd be downstairs in entry-level operations instead of sitting in my office. That's brutal. That's business, Mr. Cole. I built this company from nothing. I don't keep it running by being generous with second chances. She stood, and Ethan realized the meeting was over. He stood too, feeling off balance in a way he couldn't name. Jennifer will get you set up with the operations team, Vivian said. You'll report directly to Marcus Hale. He's head of logistics. He'll give you real projects, real deadlines. Don't disappoint me. I'll try not to. Trying isn't the same as succeeding. I know. She walked him to the door, and for a second they stood close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something subtle and expensive, like everything else about her. One more thing, she said. Yeah? The next time you get into someone's car, check who's driving. He laughed despite himself. Noted. He walked out and the door closed behind him with a quiet click. Jennifer was waiting in the hallway, smiling like she knew exactly what had just happened. Survived your first meeting with the boss? She asked. Barely. That's normal. Come on, let's get you to your real desk. Plus, the operations floor was chaos wearing business casual. Ethan's desk was in the middle of a bullpen, surrounded by analysts who barely looked up when he arrived. Marcus Hale, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with the kind of handshake that tested your pain tolerance, gave him a 10-second welcome speech and then dropped a stack of files on his desk. Start with these, Marcus said. Routing audits. Flag anything that looks broken. I need it by end of week. Got it. And Cole? Yeah? Miss Cross doesn't pull people into her office on day 1 unless she's got plans for them. Don't screw this up. He walked away before Ethan could answer. Ethan sat down, looked at the stack of files, and got to work. The week blurred into long days and longer nights. He analyzed routes, flagged errors, rebuilt tracking models. He stayed late, came in early, skipped lunch more often than not. The other analysts started asking him questions, then asking his opinion, then waiting for his opinion before finalizing their own reports. By Friday, Marcus pulled him into a conference room and dropped another problem on the table. West Coast Hub, Marcus said, delayed shipments. 3 weeks running. No one knows why. Fix it. Ethan fixed it. A vendor contract that had shifted delivery windows without updating the internal schedule. Simple fix, massive impact. By the end of his second week, people stopped introducing him as the new guy. They just called him Cole, like he'd been there for years. And every so often, he'd catch a glimpse of Vivian through the glass walls of her office, always on the phone, always moving, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. She never looked his way. He told himself he didn't care. 3 weeks in, Ethan was summoned to the executive floor again. This time, it wasn't Vivian's office. It was the boardroom. Long table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Vivian sat at the head of the table. Marcus was there. The VP who'd hired him. 2 people he didn't recognize. Sit, Vivian said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Ethan sat. She slid a folder across the table. New project. The board wants to expand into the Southeast. New distribution hubs, new vendor contracts, new everything. I need someone to build the operational framework from the ground up. That's a senior-level project, Ethan said. It is. I've been here 3 weeks. And you've solved more problems in 3 weeks than most analysts solve in a year. You want the job or not? He opened the folder. Spreadsheets, maps, projected costs, revenue models. It was massive, the kind of project that could make or break a career. "What's the timeline, what?" he asked. 3 months to draft the plan, 6 months to implementation. That's tight. I'm aware. He looked at the numbers again, saw the gaps, the risks, the places where it could all fall apart. And he saw the shape of what it could be if it worked. "I'll need direct access to vendor data," he said, "and final say on hub locations. Done. And I'll need a team. I can't do this alone." "Pick your people. Marcus will approve it." Ethan looked up at her. She was watching him the way she had in the car that first day, like she could see through him to whatever he was trying to hide. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you don't overthink. You see the problem, you fix it, you move on. That's what this project needs. And if I fail, then you fail. But I don't think you will." She stood, and the meeting was over. Ethan walked out with the folder under his arm, heart pounding, brain already spinning through logistics and timelines and contingency plans. He texted Maya. "Big project. Might be late tonight." She replied immediately. "It's okay." Mrs. Kim made soup. He smiled, slipping the phone back into his pocket. Then he went back to his desk and got to work. The Southeast expansion consumed him. He spent 18-hour days building models, negotiating with vendors, mapping routes. He pulled in 2 analysts he trusted, a logistics coordinator who knew the region, and a data specialist who could make spreadsheets do things Ethan didn't know were possible. They worked late. They worked weekends. They turned the conference room into a war room, walls covered in maps and charts and post-it notes. And every week, Vivian called him upstairs to review progress. The meetings were brutal. She questioned everything, tore apart assumptions, pushed him to justify every decision. But she never dismissed him, never made him feel small. She just made him better. "Why this hub location?" she asked one afternoon, pointing at the map. "Proximity to 3 major highways, lower real estate costs than Atlanta, access to rail lines for overflow. Traffic patterns? Analyzed. Minimal impact during peak hours. Vendor density? High. 14 suppliers within a 50-mile radius." She leaned back in her chair, studying the map. "What's the risk?" "Hurricane season. The area floods. We'd need to build contingency routes and secondary storage." "Cost?" $200,000 up front, but it saves us millions if we ever need it." She nodded slowly. "Approved. What else?" They worked through the plan, piece by piece, and by the time Ethan left her office 2 hours later, his brain felt wrung out and his coffee had gone cold. But the plan was better. She made it better. He hated how much he respected that. One Friday night in late November, Ethan was alone in the war room, staring at a spreadsheet that refused to balance, when the door opened. Vivian walked in, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking as tired as he felt. "You're still here," she said. "So are you." "I own the place. I'm allowed." "Fair point." She walked over to the table, looking at the chaos spread across it. Maps, reports, coffee cups, the remnants of someone's dinner. "How's it going?" she asked. "Good. Mostly. The vendor contracts are locked in. Hub locations are finalized. We're ahead of schedule." "But," he glanced at her. "How do you know there's a but?" "Because you're still here at 9 p.m. on a Friday." He laughed, rubbing his eyes. "The numbers don't add up. We're under budget on infrastructure, but over budget on staffing. I can't figure out how to balance it without cutting corners somewhere." "Show me." He pulled up the spreadsheet on his laptop, and Vivian leaned over his shoulder, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. She smelled like coffee and something faintly floral, and it took him a second to focus on the screen. She studied the numbers in silence, and then she reached past him, typing something into the search bar. "There," she said, pointing, "you're double counting the training costs. It's already included in the staffing line. Pull that out, and you're back under budget." Ethan stared at the screen. She was right. Of course she was right. "I've been looking at this for 3 hours," he said quietly. "You were too close to it. Sometimes you need fresh eyes." She stepped back, and he felt the absence of her like a drop in temperature. "Thank you," he said. "Don't mention it." She started to leave, then stopped at the door. "Cole?" "Yeah?" "Go home. See your daughter. The spreadsheet will still be here Monday." "I know." "So go." He looked at her, standing in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lights, and something shifted in his chest, something he didn't have a name for. "Okay," he said. She left, and Ethan sat there for another minute, staring at the spreadsheet that finally made sense. Then he packed up his things and went home. December came cold and fast. The company announced its annual gala, a black tie event at some hotel Ethan couldn't afford to walk past, let alone attend. Attendance was mandatory for senior staff, which apparently now included him. He stood in his apartment the night before the gala, staring at the suit he'd bought at a thrift store that afternoon. It fit, mostly. The sleeves were a little long, but it was black, it was clean, and it would have to do. Maya sat on his bed, watching him try to tie a bow tie for the 5th time. "You look fancy," she said. "I look like I'm pretending to be fancy." "Same thing." He laughed, giving up on the bow tie and switching to a regular tie instead. "You're going to see the car lady?" Maya asked. Ethan paused. "What?" "The one who drove you, Ms. Cross." He told Maya about Vivian exactly once, the day he got hired, and she'd latched onto it like a detective building a case. "Yeah, she'll be there." "Do you like her?" "She's my boss, Maya." "That's not what I asked." He looked at his daughter, 6 years old and too smart for her own good, and wondered when she'd learn to read him so easily. "She's brilliant," he said carefully, "and terrifying. And I respect her. But do you like her?" "It's complicated." "That means yes." "That means go brush your teeth." Maya giggled and ran off, and Ethan stood there, tie half finished, staring at his reflection and trying not to think about the fact that his 6-year-old had just called him out. The gala was everything Ethan expected and nothing he was prepared for. Crystal chandeliers, a live orchestra, women in gowns that cost more than his rent, men in tuxedos that actually fit. He stood near the bar, nursing a drink he didn't want, trying to blend into the wallpaper. Marcus found him first. "Cole, you clean up decent." "Thanks, I think." "Relax, it's just a party. Shake some hands, smile, don't insult anyone important." "That's it?" "That's it. Oh, and stay away from the VP of Finance. He's drunk by 8 and picks fights by 9. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder and disappeared into the crowd. Ethan sipped his drink, watched people network with the ease of long practice, and wondered how long he had to stay before leaving would be rude. Then he saw her. Vivian stood across the room talking to a group of executives, and she looked like someone had rebuilt her from sharper materials. Black gown, hair swept up, the kind of elegant that didn't try. She was laughing at something someone said, and it was the first time Ethan had ever seen her look genuinely at ease. She glanced across the room and their eyes met. Something passed between them. A flicker of recognition, acknowledgement, something heavier. Then she turned back to her conversation, and Ethan looked away, pulse louder than the orchestra. He decided he needed air. The terrace was cold and empty, city lights stretching out below. Ethan leaned against the railing, letting the wind bite through his jacket, grateful for the quiet. The door opened behind him. "Hiding?" He turned. Vivian stood in the doorway, arms crossed against the cold. "Regrouping," he said. "Same thing." She walked over, standing beside him at the railing. Up close, he could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. The exhaustion she hid well, but not perfectly. "Not a fan of these things?" she asked. "Not really my scene." "Mine either." "You're the CEO. This whole event is for you." "Exactly. Which is why I hate it." He laughed, surprised. "So why do it?" "Because it's expected. Because the board likes it. Because sometimes you do things you hate to keep the things you care about running smoothly." She looked at him then, and the space between them felt suddenly smaller. "Your project's almost done," she said. 2 weeks. Maybe less." "It's good work, Cole. Better than I expected." "High praise." "Don't get used to it." They stood in silence, the city humming below them, the party muffled behind the glass doors. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said. "You can ask." "Why'd you really hire me, that first day? You didn't know me. Didn't know if I'd be any good. You just took a chance." Vivian was quiet for a long time, and he thought maybe she wouldn't answer. Then she said, "You reminded me of someone." "Who?" "Me. 10 years ago. desperate, hungry, willing to do whatever it took. And that was enough? It was a start. She turned to face him fully, and in the low light her eyes looked softer than he'd ever seen them. I don't take chances often, Mr. Cole, but when I do, I'm usually right. His heart did something complicated in his chest. Dance with me, she said. It wasn't a question. Out here? He asked. Why not? The music from the ballroom drifted through the glass, something slow and old-fashioned. Vivian stepped closer, and Ethan, moving on instinct he didn't know he had, put one hand on her waist. She rested her hand on his shoulder, and they moved together, awkward at first, then easier. I don't really know how to do this, Ethan said quietly. You're doing fine. I mean all of it, the job, the gala, this, whatever this is. She looked up at him, and he saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Uncertainty, vulnerability, something human beneath all the sharpness. I don't either, she said. They danced until the song ended, and when they stepped apart, the air between them felt charged with something neither of them knew how to name. I should get back inside, Vivian said, but she didn't move. Yeah, me too. They stood there, the city glittering below, the moment stretching too long and not long enough. Then Vivian turned and walked back inside, and Ethan stood alone on the terrace, trying to remember how to breathe properly. He stayed outside for another 10 minutes, then went home without saying goodbye to anyone. Check. The next week, everything changed. Rumors started Monday morning. Quiet at first, just whispers in the break room. By Tuesday, it was open gossip. By Wednesday, people were staring. Ethan ignored it until Marcus pulled him aside. We need to talk, Marcus said. About what? About the fact that people are saying you're sleeping with the CEO. Ethan's stomach dropped. What? The gala. Someone saw you two on the terrace. Now everyone's talking. We danced. Once. For 3 minutes. I know that. You know that. But rumors don't care about facts. So what am I supposed to do? Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Keep your head down. Do your work. Let it blow over. And if it doesn't, then you'd better hope Ms. Cross has your back, because if she doesn't, this'll bury you. Ethan went back to his desk, jaw tight, hands shaking. He didn't see Vivian for 3 days. When she finally called him upstairs on Friday, he walked into her office expecting the worst. She was standing at the window, back to him. Close the door, she said. He closed it. She turned around and her face was unreadable. I'm pulling you off the Southeast project, she said. The words hit him like a fist. What? You heard me. Why? I'm 2 weeks from finishing. Everything's on track. Because people are talking, Cole. And when people talk, it affects the company. So you're punishing me for a rumor? I'm protecting both of us. By destroying my career? By being smart. He stared at her, anger rising fast and hot. You told me I was good at this. You told me the project was solid. Now you're throwing me away because someone saw us dance? I'm not throwing you away. I'm reassigning you. To what? Entry-level grunt work? To a lateral position. Same pay. Different department. That's still a demotion, and you know it. She crossed her arms, and her expression went cold. This isn't a negotiation. Then what is it? It's me making the call I have to make. Because of what people think. Because of what people know. The words hung between them, heavy and final. You're scared, Ethan said quietly. Excuse me? You're scared of the rumors, of what it means, of the fact that maybe there's something here that's real. Don't, Vivian said, voice sharp. Why not? You told me you don't take chances lightly, but the second it gets hard, you're running. I'm not running. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. Her eyes flashed, and for a second he thought she might fire him on the spot. Instead, she walked to her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an envelope. Your reassignment papers, she said, holding it out. Sign them by Monday. Ethan didn't take the envelope. What happened to the woman who hired me because I reminded her of herself? He asked. She remembered what it cost to build something worth keeping. And I'm not worth the cost? Vivian's expression cracked, just for a second. Just long enough for him to see the truth underneath. Then she put the walls back up. Sign the papers, Cole. That's an order. He took the envelope, turned, and walked out without another word. Ethan didn't sign the papers. He left them on his desk Monday morning, unsigned, and went to work like nothing had changed. The Southeast project sat in his computer, 2 weeks from completion, and he refused to let it die because Vivian Cross was afraid of what people might say. Marcus found him before lunch. "You didn't sign," Marcus said, dropping into the chair across from him. "Nope." "Cole, you can't just ignore a direct order from the CEO. Watch me." Marcus leaned back, studying him with something between concern and curiosity. "What's your play here? You think she's going to change her mind?" "I think she made the wrong call, and I think she knows it. And if she doesn't, then I get fired. But at least I'll know I didn't fold the second things got hard." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. "You've got guts, kid. Stupid guts, but guts." "Thanks, I think. Just don't be surprised when this blows up in your face." He left, and Ethan went back to work. The week crawled by. Vivian didn't call him upstairs, didn't send another email, didn't acknowledge his existence at all. But she didn't fire him either. By Friday, the unsigned papers were still sitting on his desk, and Ethan was still working on the Southeast project like it was his job. Because technically, it still was. He stayed late that night, alone in the war room, finalizing the last pieces of the implementation plan. The office had emptied hours ago. Even the security guards looked half asleep when he passed them in the lobby. He was deep into a vendor contract review when the door opened. Vivian stood in the doorway, coat on, bag over her shoulder, looking like she'd been about to leave and changed her mind. "You're still here," she said. "So are you." She walked in, closed the door behind her, and stood there for a moment like she was trying to figure out what to say. "You didn't sign the papers," she said finally. "No." "Why not?" "Because you were wrong." Her jaw tightened. "I gave you an order. You gave me a bad order. There's a difference." "That's not how this works, Cole. I'm the CEO. You're an analyst. When I tell you to do something, you do it. Even when it's the wrong thing, especially then." Ethan stood up, closing his laptop. "You pulled me off the Southeast project because people are gossiping, not because I did bad work, not because I screwed up, because you're afraid of what it looks like. I'm protecting the company. You're protecting yourself." "Same thing." "No, it's not." Vivian's eyes flashed, and she stepped closer. "You have no idea what it takes to run this place. The decisions I have to make, the things I have to sacrifice. You're right, I don't, but I know what it's like to be good at something and have someone take it away because they're scared." "I'm not scared." "Then what are you?" The question hung between them, sharp and unanswered. Vivian looked away first, her shoulders tight, her hands clenched at her sides. "I built this company from nothing," she said quietly. "I was 26. No connections, no money, just an idea and enough arrogance to think I could make it work. I've spent 15 years protecting it, growing it, making sure it survives, and I've done that by never letting anything personal get in the way. Until now." She looked at him, and something in her expression cracked. "Until now." The air between them went still. "I don't know how to do this," Vivian said, and her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "I don't know how to want something and not destroy it by holding on too tight. So don't hold on too tight. That's not how I work." "Maybe it should be." She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "You make it sound simple." "It's not, but walking away isn't simple either." Vivian closed her eyes, and for a moment she looked exhausted. Not the polished, unshakable CEO, just a woman who'd been carrying too much for too long. "I can't do this, Ethan," she said, and the use of his first name hit him harder than he expected. "I can't risk everything I've built for something that might not even work. And if it does work, then I still lose, because people will say I'm weak, that I let my personal life compromise my judgment, that I'm not fit to lead. Do you believe that?" "It doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what they think." Ethan stepped closer, close enough to see the faint circles under her eyes, the tension in her jaw. "You told me once that you don't take chances lightly," he said, "but when you do, you're usually right. This isn't business, Cole. This is different." "I know. That's what makes it worth the risk." She looked at him, and he saw the war happening behind her eyes. Fear against want, control against chaos. Everything she'd built against everything she was too afraid to reach for. Then she stepped back. "Sign the papers," she said. "Please." It wasn't an order this time. It was a plea, and somehow that made it worse. "No," Ethan said quietly. Vivian's face went blank. "Then you're fired." The words landed like a punch, but Ethan didn't flinch. "Okay," he said. She stared at him, and he saw the moment she realized he wasn't going to fight her, wasn't going to argue. He was just going to let her do it. "You're not going to beg me to reconsider?" she asked. "Would it change anything?" "No." "Then why would I beg?" Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, respect, something that looked almost like regret. "I'll have HR process the termination," she said. "You'll get severance, a good reference. I'll make sure you land somewhere decent." "I don't want your guilt money, Vivian." "It's not guilt, it's fair." "Nothing about this is fair." She didn't argue. Ethan picked up his jacket, slung it over his shoulder, and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle. "For what it's worth," he said without turning around, "I think you're making a mistake. Not just with me, with yourself." He left before she could answer. The next morning, Ethan woke up unemployed for the first time in 2 months. Maya was eating cereal at the kitchen table, oblivious to the fact that her father's carefully rebuilt life had just collapsed again. "You're home early," she said, looking up. "Yeah, no work today." "How come?" He sat down across from her, trying to figure out how to explain this in a way that wouldn't scare her. "I had a disagreement with my boss," he said carefully, "so I'm not working there anymore." Maya's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "You got fired?" "Kind of." "Because of the car lady?" He blinked. "What?" "You said she was your boss, and you liked her. Did you get fired because you liked her?" Sometimes Ethan forgot how much his daughter saw, how much she understood even when he didn't explain. "It's more complicated than that," he said. "That means yes." "Maya Bates, are we going to be okay?" The question hit him in the chest. She'd asked it before, the day he got hired, and he'd promised her they would be. Saying, "Yeah, baby, we're going to be okay." Promise? He looked at his daughter, 6 years old and already too familiar with instability, and felt the weight of everything he couldn't control pressing down on him. "I promise," he said. She went back to her cereal, satisfied, and Ethan sat there wondering how he was going to keep that promise. He spent the weekend updating his resume, reaching out to old contacts, applying for jobs he was overqualified for, and some he wasn't qualified for at all. By Monday, he had 2 interviews lined up. By Tuesday, he had 4. None of them felt right. Wednesday afternoon, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Cole, this is Richard Chen. I'm on the board at Cross Logistics." Ethan sat up straighter. "Okay. I heard about your departure. I wanted to reach out personally." "Why?" "Because I reviewed your work on the Southeast expansion. It's exceptional, the kind of strategic thinking we need more of, not less." "Then maybe you should have told Ms. Cross that before she fired me." Chen laughed. "I did. She didn't listen, which is why I'm calling. I have a proposal for you." "I'm listening." "There's a logistics firm in New York, smaller than Cross but growing fast. They're looking for a director of operations. I recommended you. They want to meet." "New York. I know it's a big move, but the pay is better than what you were making here, and frankly, it's what you deserve." Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. New York, a fresh start, a real title, enough money to give Maya stability, everything he'd been fighting for. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. They'd like an answer by next week." "I'll let you know." He hung up and sat in the quiet apartment, trying to figure out what he wanted. The smart choice was obvious. Take the job. Move to New York. Leave Boston and Vivian Cross and all the complicated mess behind. But nothing about the past 2 months had been smart. Innate. Thursday night, Ethan found himself standing outside Cross Logistics headquarters, staring up at the building like an idiot. He didn't have a badge anymore, couldn't get past security, didn't even know if Vivian was still in the office, but he stayed anyway, hands in his pockets, watching the lights in the upper floors. He was about to leave when the front doors opened and she walked out. Vivian stopped when she saw him, and for a second neither of them moved. Then she walked over slowly, coat pulled tight against the December wind. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I don't know." "You shouldn't be here." "I know." They stood in the cold, the city moving around them, and Ethan wondered what he was supposed to say. What words could possibly bridge the gap between what had happened and where they were now? "I got a job offer," he said finally. "New York, Director of Operations. Good money, better title." Something flickered across her face. "Congratulations." "I haven't accepted yet." "Why not?" "Because I keep thinking about what you said, about not knowing how to want something without destroying it." "Ethan, I get it now. I do. You've spent 15 years building something that matters, and you think if you let yourself want anything else, it'll all fall apart. It will. Maybe. Or maybe you're just scared of finding out you can have both." Vivian looked away, jaw tight. "You don't understand. Then explain it to me." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I don't know how." The words came out sharper than she meant them to, and she took a breath, steadying herself. "I've spent my entire life being sure, making decisions, knowing exactly what I want and how to get it. And then you showed up, soaking wet and desperate, and completely wrong for me, and suddenly I don't know anything anymore." Ethan's heart was pounding. "Is that such a bad thing?" "Yes, because uncertainty destroys everything. Or it builds something new." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw the same war in her eyes he'd seen in her office, the same fear fighting against something that wanted to break free. "I fired you," she said quietly. "I chose the company over you. How do you not hate me for that?" "Because I understand why you did it. Doesn't mean I agree, but I understand. You should take the New York job." "Probably." "It's what's best for you, for your daughter." "Maybe." "Then why are you still here?" Ethan stepped closer, close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her face, the cracks in her armor. "Because I think you're worth the risk," he said. "And I think you know I am too. But you're too scared to admit it." "I'm not scared." "Yes, you are. And that's okay. I'm scared too. I've got a 6-year-old daughter who depends on me. I can't afford to make stupid choices. But pretending I don't feel this doesn't make it go away. It just makes me a liar." Vivian's breath caught, and for a moment he thought she might close the distance between them. Instead, she stepped back. "I can't do this," she said. "I'm sorry, but I can't." She turned and walked away, back toward the building, back to the safety of everything she knew. Ethan stood there in the cold, watching her go, and felt something break inside his chest. Then he went home. All right. Friday morning, he called Richard Chen and accepted the New York job. He had 2 weeks to pack up his life, find a new apartment, and figure out how to tell Maya they were leaving the only home she remembered. He started with the apartment search, found a decent 2-bedroom in Queens, not as nice as what they had in Boston, but safer. Better schools nearby, close to a park. Then he told Maya. She took it better than he expected, asked questions about New York, whether they had good pizza, whether she could bring all her stuffed animals, whether the car lady would visit. That last question hit him harder than it should have. "Probably not, baby," he said. "How come?" "Because she's staying here, and we're going there." "But you like her." "It's complicated." "You always say that?" "Because it's always true." Maya thought about this for a moment. Then she said, "I think she likes you too." "What makes you say that?" "Because you look sad when you talk about her. And people only look sad about people who matter." Ethan pulled his daughter into a hug, wondering when she'd gotten so wise. "You're too smart for 6, he said. "I know." The next week blurred into packing boxes and final arrangements. Ethan said goodbye to Mrs. Kim, who cried and made him promise to call. Said goodbye to the apartment that had been barely enough but still home. By Thursday, most of their things were in a moving truck headed to New York. By Friday, Ethan had 1 day left in Boston. He spent it walking the city with Maya, showing her all the places he'd miss. The coffee shop where he used to work on his laptop, the park where they fed ducks on Sundays, the library where Maya had learned to read. As the sun started to set, they ended up near the harbor, watching the water turn gold. "You okay, Daddy?" Maya asked. Yeah, just thinking. About the car lady? He smiled despite himself. Yeah. You should say goodbye. I don't think she wants to hear from me. You don't know that. I kind of do. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mrs. Kim says sometimes people need time to figure out what they want. Maybe the car lady just needs time. Maybe. So you should still say goodbye, just in case. Ethan looked at his daughter and something settled in his chest. You're right, he said. I should, son. That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan sat down and wrote an email. He rewrote it 4 times, deleted it twice, finally settled on something that felt honest. Vivian, I'm leaving for New York tomorrow. I wanted you to know, even though I'm not sure why it matters. I don't regret any of it, the job, the project, the dance, even getting fired. Because for 2 months, I got to do work that mattered with someone who made me better at it. You told me you don't know how to want something without destroying it. I think you're wrong. I think you're just scared of wanting it in the first place. I hope someday you figure out you're worth the risk, not just to me, to yourself. Take care of yourself. Ethan. He hit send before he could change his mind. Then he closed his laptop and went to bed. Down. Saturday morning came gray and cold. The moving truck was gone. The apartment was empty except for 2 suitcases and Maya's backpack. Their train left at noon. Ethan was doing a final walkthrough, making sure they hadn't forgotten anything, when his phone rang. Vivian. He stared at the screen, heart pounding, and almost didn't answer. Then he did. Hello? Where are you? Her voice was tight, urgent. My apartment. Why? Stay there. I'm coming over. Vivian. She hung up. Ethan stood in the middle of the empty living room, phone still in his hand, trying to figure out what had just happened. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. He opened it, and Vivian was standing there, no coat despite the cold, hair loose, looking like she'd driven over without thinking. Hi, he said. You're leaving. Yeah. Today. Yeah. She stepped inside, looking at the empty apartment, the suitcases by the door, the evidence of a life being packed away. I got your email, she said. I figured. You're wrong. About what? About me being scared of wanting things. I'm not scared of wanting. I'm scared of losing. Ethan closed the door. Vivian, let me finish. She turned to face him, and he saw something raw in her expression. I've lost things before. People. Opportunities. Things I thought I couldn't live without. And I survived by telling myself that the only thing that matters is the work, the company, the thing I can control. And then you showed up and made me want something I can't control. And that terrified me, so I pushed you away. I told myself it was the right call, the smart call. And maybe it was. But I've spent the last week trying to go back to normal, to focus on the work, to pretend that firing you was just another business decision. And I can't. Because every time I walk past that conference room or drive past the corner where I picked you up or sit in a board meeting and someone asks a question you would have answered better than anyone else, I remember. Her voice cracked on the last word. Remember what? Ethan asked quietly. That I chose fear over you, and I hate myself for it. The silence that followed was so heavy, Ethan could feel it in his chest. So what do you want me to say? He asked. That I forgive you? That I'll stay? I don't know. Neither do I. Vivian looked at him, and he saw the exhaustion in her face, the weight of everything she'd been carrying alone. I came here to tell you I'm sorry, she said, and to ask if it's too late. Too late for what? To try. To figure out if this thing between us is real, or just something we both wanted badly enough to convince ourselves it was. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he could barely think. I have a daughter, Vivian. I have a life that's barely holding together. I can't afford to take risks on things that might not work. I know. And you have a company, a reputation, a board that's probably already questioning your judgment. I know that too. So what are we doing? She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her gray eyes. I don't know, she said, but I think we should find out. And then she kissed him. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was urgent and messy. and tasted like desperation and hope in equal measure. Ethan's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she made a sound against his mouth that erased every rational thought he'd been trying to hold on to. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian rested her forehead against his. "I don't have a plan," she said. "I don't know how this works, but I know I don't want you to leave. I accepted the New York job." "Unaccept it. It doesn't work like that." "Then make it work like that." He laughed, breathless. "You're insane." "Probably. And this could still blow up in both our faces. Most likely. But you want to try anyway?" "Yes." Ethan pulled back just enough to look at her. "What about the company, the board, the rumors?" "I'll handle it." "How?" "I don't know yet. But I didn't build this company by playing it safe. Maybe it's time I remembered that." He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe this could work. But the practical part of his brain, the part that had been keeping him and Maya alive for 3 years, was screaming warnings. "I need to think," he said. Vivian's face fell, just slightly. "Okay. I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need to think. This isn't just about me." "I know." She stepped back and the space between them felt like a canyon. "My train leaves at noon," Ethan said. "If I'm staying, I need to decide before then." "And if you go?" "Then I go, and we both move on." Vivian nodded, jaw tight, and walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you're worth the risk too." Then she left, and Ethan stood in the empty apartment, trying to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do. Ethan sat on the floor of the empty apartment for 20 minutes after Vivian left, staring at his phone like it might tell him what to do. It didn't. Maya wandered out of the bedroom dragging her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Was that the car lady?" she asked. "Yeah." "What did she want?" Ethan looked at his daughter, who was watching him with the kind of attention that meant she already knew the answer. "She asked me to stay," he said. Maya sat down next to him, cross-legged, rabbit in her lap. "What did you say?" "I said I needed to think about it." "What's there to think about?" "A lot, baby. We have a new apartment in New York. I have a job waiting. We have a whole plan." "Plans change. Not always for the better." Maya was quiet for a moment, picking at the rabbit's ear. Then she said, "Do you love her?" The question hit him like cold water. "Maya, it's okay if you do. I just want to know." Ethan took a breath, trying to figure out how to answer honestly without making promises he couldn't keep. "I don't know if it's love yet," he said carefully. "But it could be, if we let it. Then we should let it. It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because love doesn't fix everything. It doesn't pay rent or guarantee stability or make sure you have a good school. But it makes you happy." He looked at her, and something cracked open in his chest. "Yeah, it does." "Then that's what matters." "When did you get so smart?" She grinned. "I've always been smart. You just don't listen." He pulled her into a hug, and she wrapped her skinny arms around his neck. "If we stay," he said quietly, "things might get complicated. People might talk. It might be hard." "Hard's okay. We've done hard before." "Yeah, we have." She pulled back, looking at him seriously. "So are we staying?" Ethan checked his phone, 10:30. The train left at noon. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I'm going to figure it out." He called Richard Chen first. "Mr. Cole?" Chen answered on the second ring. "Everything all right?" "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Of course." "Did Vivian know you were offering me the New York job?" There was a pause, then Chen sighed. "Yes." Ethan closed his eyes. "She asked you to do it." "Not exactly. She called me after she fired you, said you deserved better than what happened. Asked if I knew anyone who might be hiring. I mentioned the New York firm. She thought it was a good fit. So she was trying to get rid of me." "No, she was trying to take care of you. There's a difference." Ethan sat down on the kitchen counter, processing. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you asked, and because I think you deserve to know that Vivian Cross doesn't do guilt. If she went out of her way to help you, it's because she cares, even if she's too stubborn to admit it. She admitted it this morning." "Did she now?" Chen sounded amused. "And what are you going to do about it?" I'm still figuring that out. Well, figure it out fast. The New York firm needs an answer by end of day. I know. For what it's worth, Cole, I've known Vivian for 10 years. I've never seen her rattled by anything. But you rattled her. That's either very good or very dangerous. Probably both, Chen laughed. Probably. Good luck. He hung up, and Ethan sat there, turning the conversation over in his mind. Then he called the New York firm. The HR director answered, professional and brisk. Mr. Cole, I hope you're calling with good news. Actually, I need to decline the offer. Silence. Then, may I ask why? Personal reasons. I'm staying in Boston. I see. That's disappointing. We were looking forward to having you on board. I appreciate the opportunity. I really do. If circumstances change, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you. He hung up before he could second-guess himself. Then he texted Vivian. I'm staying. We need to talk. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a response. Where? Your office. 1 hour. I'll be there. He looked at Maya, who was watching him with barely contained excitement. We're staying, he said. She launched herself at him, and he caught her, spinning her around the empty apartment while she laughed. I knew it, she said. I knew you'd pick her. I didn't pick her. I picked us. All of us. Same thing. Maybe it was. Man. Ethan arrived at Cross Logistics headquarters at 11:30, still wearing jeans and a sweater, because he didn't have time to change and didn't particularly care. Security recognized him, looked confused, and made a phone call. 30 seconds later, they waved him through. He took the elevator to the executive floor, heart pounding, no plan beyond showing up and figuring it out as he went. Jennifer was at her desk, eyes widening when she saw him. Mr. Cole, I thought you... Is she in? Yes, but... Thanks. He walked past her and knocked on Vivian's door. Come in. He opened the door and stepped inside. Vivian stood by the window, arms crossed, looking like she'd been pacing. She turned when he entered, and something in her expression shifted. You came, she said. You asked me to. I didn't think you would. I turned down the New York job. Her breath caught. Ethan, I'm not done. He closed the door behind him, leaning against it. I turned it down because you were right. About all of it. I don't want to leave. I don't want to walk away from this. But I need you to understand something. Okay. I have a daughter who's been through enough chaos. If we do this, I need to know you're in, not halfway, not until it gets hard, all the way. I am. You say that now. But the second the board starts asking questions, or the rumors get worse, or it becomes inconvenient, I won't run. She stepped closer. I know I did before, and I'm sorry. But I'm done being afraid of what people think. What changed? You left, and I realized that protecting the company doesn't mean anything if I'm miserable doing it. Ethan studied her, looking for cracks, for hesitation, for any sign that she didn't mean it. He didn't find any. So what happens now? He asked. Now we figure it out. Together. The board's going to lose their minds. Let them. Vivian. I'm serious. I've spent 15 years doing what they want, playing by their rules, building their version of success. Maybe it's time I build my own. That's a hell of a risk. You told me I was worth it. I'm starting to believe you. Something in her voice made his chest tighten. I need my job back, he said. You never lost it. The termination papers were never filed. What? I couldn't bring myself to sign them. They've been sitting on my desk for a week. Ethan laughed, surprised. So I've been unemployed in my head this whole time. Essentially. You're unbelievable. I know. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, see the exhaustion still lingering at the edges of her eyes. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. The personal thing. I've spent so long keeping people at arm's length that I don't remember how to let them in. So we'll figure it out. What if I'm terrible at it? Then you'll be terrible at it, and we'll deal with it. You make it sound easy. It's not. But I think we're both tired of pretending it's impossible. Vivian looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked unsure. Not of the company or the work or the decisions that needed to be made. Just of this. of them. I'm scared, she said. Me too. But you're still here. Yeah, I am. She reached up, touching his face, and he leaned into it without thinking. Stay for dinner, she said. Tonight, with me. No work, no company, just us. I have to pick up Maya from Mrs. Kim's. Bring her. Ethan pulled back slightly. You want to have dinner with my 6-year-old daughter on our first real date? Why not? Because most people ease into the family thing. I'm not most people. I've noticed. She smiled then, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her in weeks. 7 o'clock, she said. My place. I'll cook. You cook? Badly, but I'll try. This should be interesting. Probably a disaster. I'm counting on it. He kissed her then, quick and impulsive, and she made a small sound of surprise before kissing him back. When they broke apart, she was still smiling. Go get your daughter, she said. I need to figure out what I'm making for dinner. Please don't poison us. No promises. Well, Ethan picked up Maya at noon, explained that they weren't getting on a train, and watched her process the information with the seriousness of a judge deliberating a verdict. So we're staying, she said. We're staying. And you're going to date the car lady. Her name is Vivian, and yes. Is she nice? She's complicated. That's not the same thing. I know, but yeah, she's nice. In her own way. Maya considered this. Okay, but if she's mean to you, I'm going to tell her off. Deal. They spent the afternoon unpacking the 2 suitcases they'd planned to take on the train, rearranging the apartment that was still mostly empty but starting to feel like home again. At 6:30, Ethan's phone buzzed. My address. See you soon. He plugged it into his GPS and realized Vivian lived in the kind of building that had a doorman and a lobby that looked like a hotel. She's rich, Maya observed as they pulled up. Very. Does that matter? Not to me. The doorman let them in with a polite nod, and they took the elevator to the 10th floor. Ethan found the apartment number and knocked. Vivian opened the door, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual suit, hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger like this, less intimidating. Hi, she said. Hi. She looked down at Maya. You must be Maya. Maya stared up at her with the unblinking intensity only 6-year-olds could manage. You're the car lady. Vivian's lips twitched. I am. My dad talks about you a lot. Maya, Ethan warned. He does. He gets all weird and quiet when I ask about you. Vivian laughed, and it was the first time Ethan had heard her laugh like that. Open, unguarded. Come in, she said, stepping aside. Dinner's almost ready. And by almost ready, I mean I'm trying very hard not to burn it. The apartment was exactly what Ethan expected. Sleek, modern, immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable. The kind of place designed to impress, not to live in. But the kitchen smelled like garlic and something tomato-based, and there were cookbooks open on the counter, and Vivian looked genuinely stressed about whatever was happening on the stove. Can I help? Ethan asked. Can you cook? Better than most. Then yes, please, before I ruin everything. He walked over, looked at the pan, and immediately saw the problem. You're cooking it too hot. I thought high heat was faster. High heat is burned. He turned the burner down, stirred the sauce, and tasted it. Not bad. A little too much salt, but fixable. Maya wandered over to the window, pressing her nose against the glass. You can see everything from here. Vivian joined her. It's my favorite part. Do you ever get lonely? Being this high up? The question was so simple, so direct, and Ethan saw Vivian pause. Sometimes, she said quietly. Me and my dad get lonely sometimes too. But then we have each other, so it's okay. Vivian looked at Maya for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. You're very smart, she said. I know, my dad says I get it from him. Ethan snorted. I said you get your stubbornness from me. The smart is all you. Maya grinned and Vivian smiled, and Ethan felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like the beginning of something he didn't have a name for yet. They ate at Vivian's dining table, which had probably never been used for anything as casual as spaghetti and garlic bread. Maya asked 1,000 questions, half of which Vivian answered with surprising patience. The other half she deflected with humor. After dinner, Maya curled up on the couch with a book Vivian pulled from a shelf, and Ethan helped clean up. "That went better than I expected," Vivian said, loading the dishwasher. "She likes you." "How can you tell?" "She hasn't told you off yet. That's a good sign." Vivian laughed. "High bar." "She's protective. She's been through a lot." "I know, you both have." They worked in comfortable silence for a minute, and then Vivian said, "I need to tell the board." Ethan stopped wiping the counter. "When?" "Monday. I'm calling an emergency meeting. I'm going to tell them I've reinstated you, and that we're seeing each other, and if they have a problem with it, they can take it up with me." "That's going to go over well." "Probably not, but I meant what I said. I'm done hiding." "What if they push back?" "Then I'll push harder." Ethan set the towel down and turned to face her. "You could lose everything." "I could, but I've already lost you once. I'm not doing it again." He pulled her close, and she leaned into him, forehead against his chest. "This is terrifying," she said. "Yeah, it is. But also kind of exciting." "Yeah, that too." They stood like that for a long time, the city glowing outside the windows, Maya reading on the couch, the dishwasher humming in the background. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it felt real. And that was enough. Monday morning, Vivian called the emergency board meeting. Ethan wasn't there, but she told him about it later, sitting in his car in the parking garage because her office felt too exposed. "I told them everything," she said. "That I'd fired you, that I'd been wrong, that we were involved, that I was reinstating you to finish the Southeast project. And Richard Chen backed me immediately, said the company needed people like you, and that my personal life was none of their business as long as the work got done." "What about the others?" "Mixed. A few supported me, a few abstained, 2 called for my resignation." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Vivian, I didn't give it to them. I told them if they wanted me gone, they could vote me out. But I wasn't stepping down because I'd committed the crime of being human." "What did they say?" "Nothing. They tabled the discussion, which means they're regrouping, figuring out their next move." "So it's not over?" "No, but I knew it wouldn't be." She looked at him, and he saw the exhaustion there, the weight of the fight she'd just picked. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a week." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out." "You keep saying that." "Because I mean it." She leaned over and kissed him, quick and desperate, and he kissed her back like they weren't sitting in a parking garage where anyone could see. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "Go back to work," she said. "I have a company to save." Our company. Our company. The next 3 months were chaos. Ethan returned to the Southeast project and finished it 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The implementation went smoother than anyone expected, and by February the new distribution network was operational and already showing profit. Vivian faced the board again in January. This time, she had numbers to back her up. Revenue projections. Efficiency gains. Proof that her decisions, personal or otherwise, were making the company stronger. They voted to keep her. Barely. But it was enough. The rumors never fully went away. People still talked, still whispered when Ethan and Vivian were in the same room. But slowly, the gossip lost its edge, became background noise instead of front-page drama. And in the middle of all of it, Ethan and Vivian figured out how to be together. It wasn't smooth. Vivian worked late and forgot to text. Ethan got protective when board members questioned her judgment. They argued about boundaries, about work-life balance, about how much to share with Maya and when. But they showed up. Every time. Vivian started coming to dinner at Ethan's apartment once a week. Awkward at first, then easier. She learned that Maya hated broccoli but loved carrots, that bedtime was non-negotiable, that Ethan's cooking was better than any restaurant. Ethan learned that Vivian was terrified of failure, that she'd built the company to prove something to parents who never believed in her, that underneath all the armor was someone who just wanted to be wanted for who she was, not what she'd built. They learned each other slowly, carefully, like people who knew the cost of getting it wrong. And somewhere in the middle of all that learning, the thing between them stopped being a risk and started being real. March came cold and wet, and Maya got sick. Not serious. Just a flu that knocked her flat for 3 days. Ethan took time off work, set up camp in her bedroom with books and soup and cartoons. On the second night, there was a knock on the door. He opened it to find Vivian standing there, holding a bag from the pharmacy and a stack of picture books. "Hi," she said. "Hi, what are you doing here?" "I heard Maya was sick. I thought I'd check in." "You didn't have to do that." "I know." He let her in, and she set the bag on the kitchen counter. "I got the good cough syrup, the kind that actually works, and some books, but I wasn't sure what she'd already read, so I just grabbed a bunch." "Vivian, is she awake?" "Yeah, she's in her room." Vivian walked down the hall and knocked softly. "Maya? It's Vivian. Can I come in?" "Okay." Ethan followed, leaning against the doorway as Vivian sat on the edge of Maya's bed. "I heard you're not feeling great," Vivian said. Maya sniffled. "I have the flu." "That's the worst. I brought you some books and medicine. Your dad can give you the medicine later." "Thanks." "You're welcome." Maya studied her for a moment, then said, "You didn't have to come." "I know, but I wanted to." "How come?" Vivian glanced at Ethan, then back at Maya. "Because I care about you and your dad, and when people I care about aren't feeling well, I want to help." Maya thought about this. Then she said, "Do you love my dad?" Vivian's breath caught, and Ethan straightened, about to intervene. But Vivian spoke first. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I do." It was the first time she'd said it out loud. Maya smiled, even though she looked exhausted. "Good. He loves you too. He's just scared to say it." "Maya," Ethan said. "It's true." Vivian looked at him, and he saw the question in her eyes. He walked over, sat on the other side of Maya's bed, and took Vivian's hand. "She's not wrong," he said. Vivian's eyes went bright, and she squeezed his hand. "Read me a story?" Maya asked, already half asleep. "Which one?" Vivian asked. "You pick." So Vivian picked a book from the stack, and she read while Maya drifted off. And Ethan sat there watching the two of them and feeling something so big in his chest, he didn't have words for it. When Maya was fully asleep, they tiptoed out, closing the door softly behind them. In the kitchen, Vivian turned to him. "I meant it," she said. "What I said in there." "I know. I've never said that to anyone before." "I know that too." "Does it scare you?" "Terrifies me." She smiled. "Good, because I'm terrified too." He pulled her close, and she wrapped her arms around him, and they stood there in his tiny kitchen that smelled like soup and medicine, holding each other like they were the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. "I love you too," Ethan said quietly, in case that wasn't clear. It was, but it's nice to hear. They stayed like that until Vivian had to leave for an early meeting, and even then she hesitated at the door. "Thank you," Ethan said, "for coming, for the books, for everything." "You don't have to thank me." "I know, but I'm going to anyway." She kissed him, soft and lingering, and then she left. And Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her go, and felt like maybe, finally, things were starting to make sense. Spring arrived slowly, then all at once, the way it always did in Boston. The city shook off winter like a wet coat, and by April the harbor smelled like salt and possibility instead of just cold. Ethan had been back at Cross Logistics for 4 months, and the Southeast expansion was no longer a project. It was a success. Revenue numbers came in higher than projected. Distribution times dropped by 18%. The board, the same board that had called for Vivian's resignation 3 months ago, now used the expansion as proof of the company's strength in quarterly reports. No one mentioned that Ethan Cole, the analyst they'd wanted gone, had built the entire thing. Well, almost no one. Marcus stopped by Ethan's desk one Tuesday morning, dropping a folder in front of him. "Congratulations," Marcus said. Ethan looked up. "For what?" "Open it." Inside was a promotion letter. Senior operations manager, 20% raise, his own team, an office with actual walls instead of a desk in the bullpen. Ethan stared at the paper, reading it twice to make sure it was real. "This is deserved," Marcus finished. "You've earned it 10 times over. The board approved it unanimously yesterday." "Even the ones who wanted me fired?" "Even them. Turns out results matter more than gossip. Who knew?" Ethan laughed, a little stunned. "When does it start?" "Monday. which gives you 4 days to move into your new office and figure out who you want on your team. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Well done, Cole, seriously. After Marcus left, Ethan sat there staring at the letter, feeling something warm and unfamiliar spread through his chest. He texted Vivian. Got promoted. Senior Ops Manager. 3 dots appeared immediately. I know, I approved it. You could have warned me. Where's the fun in that? Dinner tonight? My place. Maya wants to celebrate. I'll bring dessert. He smiled at his phone, then tucked the letter into his bag and got back to work. That night, Maya insisted on making a banner. She used an entire roll of printer paper, taping sheets together into one long strip, and wrote, "Congrats, Dad," in marker so big the letters barely fit. She hung it across the living room, crooked and perfect, and stood back to admire her work. It's good, right? She asked. It's perfect, Ethan said. Vivian's gonna love it. Probably. She's gonna be here soon. I gotta change. You look fine. I look like I've been doing homework. That's not the same. She ran to her room, and Ethan stood in the kitchen, stirring pasta sauce, and wondering when his life had become the kind where his daughter got dressed up for dinner with his girlfriend. His girlfriend. The word still felt strange, too small for what Vivian actually was, too casual for someone who'd turned his entire world sideways and then helped him rebuild it into something better. The knock came at 6:30, right on time. Ethan opened the door, and Vivian stood there holding a bakery box and looking tired in a way that meant she'd been in back-to-back meetings all day. Hi, she said. Hi yourself, rough day? The board wanted to discuss next quarter's projections. It took 3 hours. Sounds painful. It was, but I survived. She held up the box. I brought tiramisu. You're my favorite person. I know. Maya appeared in the doorway wearing her best dress and a grin. Vivian? Hey, Maya. I like your banner. I made it myself. Daddy got promoted. I heard. Pretty impressive. He's the best. Vivian smiled, and Ethan saw something soft in her expression. Yeah, he is. They ate dinner at the small kitchen table. The three of them squeezed around it in a way that should have felt cramped, but didn't. Maya told a story about a kid in her class who'd brought a frog to school. Vivian told a story about a board member who'd fallen asleep during a presentation. Ethan just listened, watching them, feeling the warmth of it settle into his bones. After dinner, Maya pulled out a deck of cards and insisted they play Go Fish, which turned into an hour-long tournament that Vivian took way too seriously. You're cheating, Maya accused when Vivian won the 3rd round. I'm strategic. There's a difference. That's what cheaters say. Ethan laughed, and Vivian threw a card at him. By 8:30, Maya was yawning between hands, and Ethan sent her to brush her teeth. I'll be there in a minute to tuck you in, he called after her. Can Vivian do it? The request was so casual, so easy, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Vivian looked at Ethan, surprised. If you want to, he said quietly. Yeah, okay. She followed Maya down the hall, and Ethan started clearing the table, listening to their voices drift from the bedroom. Maya asking about Vivian's job. Vivian explaining supply chains in terms a 6-year-old could understand. Maya asking if Vivian was going to marry her dad. Ethan froze, plate in hand. I don't know, Vivian said honestly. That's a pretty big question. But you love him. I do. And he loves you. Yeah. Then you should marry him. That's what people do when they love each other. It's a little more complicated than that. Why? Because grown-up things usually are. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I think you'd be a good stepmom. Ethan's chest tightened. You do? Vivian asked, voice careful. Yeah, you're smart, and you make my dad happy, and you don't treat me like I'm dumb just because I'm little. You're definitely not dumb. I know, but a lot of people think kids are. Well, they're wrong. Maya yawned. I'm glad you're here. Me too. There was a pause, and then Maya said, Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you going to leave, like my mom did? Ethan's hand clenched around the plate. Vivian's voice, when she answered, was steady. No, I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. Okay, good. A minute later, Vivian emerged from the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. She looked shaken. Ethan set the plate down and walked over. You okay? She asked if I was going to leave. I heard. I told her I wasn't. I heard that too. Vivian looked at him, eyes a little too bright. I meant it. I know. Do you? Because I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere, not when things get hard, not when the board pushes back again, not when we fight or screw up or don't know what we're doing. I'm here. Ethan pulled her close, and she wrapped her arms around him, holding on tight. I know, he said again, quieter this time. And I'm here too. They stood like that for a long time, the apartment quiet around them, the city humming outside. When they finally pulled apart, Vivian wiped her eyes quickly. Sorry, she said. I don't usually. Don't apologize. I'm not good at this. The emotional stuff. You're better than you think. She smiled, a little watery. Maya's scary perceptive. Tell me about it. She figured out I was in love with you before I did. Smart kid. The smartest. Vivian glanced toward the bedroom, then back at him. Did she really ask if I was going to marry you? Apparently. And you're not freaked out by that? Should I be? Most people would be. We've been together 4 months. Yeah, and I was ready to leave the state for you after 2. So my timeline might be skewed. She laughed, surprised. Fair point. For the record, Ethan said, I'm not asking, I'm not rushing, but I'm also not scared of the idea. Me neither. Yeah? Yeah? He kissed her, slow and careful, and she kissed him back like she was memorizing the shape of it. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I should go, she said. Early meeting tomorrow. Stay. Ethan, just for a little while. We can sit on the couch. Watch something terrible on TV, fall asleep like normal people. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but I'm picking the show. Deal. They ended up watching a documentary about Antarctic penguins, Vivian's head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Neither of them made it past the 20-minute mark before falling asleep. Ethan woke up at midnight to find Vivian still there, curled against him, breathing steady and deep. He didn't wake her, just pulled a blanket over them both and let himself fall back asleep. Summer hit hard and fast. The company threw its annual summer gala in June, and this time Ethan and Vivian arrived together. No hiding, no separate entrances, just the two of them walking in side by side, her hand in his, facing down the stairs in whispers like they didn't matter. Because they didn't. Marcus found them near the bar, grinning. Look at you two. Couple of the year. Shut up, Ethan said. I'm serious. You're setting trends. Half the senior staff is jealous. Of what? Of the fact that you figured out how to have a life outside this place. Most of us are still pretending work-life balance is a myth. Vivian raised her glass. It's not a myth. It's just hard. Preach. They mingled, shook hands, made small talk with people who'd spent months gossiping about them and now acted like they'd been supportive all along. Ethan hated every minute of it, but Vivian seemed lighter than usual, laughing more easily, her hand finding his whenever they were standing still. Around 9, she pulled him onto the terrace. Needed air? He asked. Needed you. She kissed him, and he tasted champagne and something sweeter underneath. People are watching, he said when they broke apart. Let them. You've changed. You've changed me. I don't think I did. I think you were always like this. You just didn't let anyone see it. She smiled. Maybe. They stood at the railing, looking out at the city, the same view they'd had the night they danced, the night everything shifted. You know what I was thinking about earlier? Vivian said. What? That day you got in my car, the way you talked the entire ride about your daughter and your bills and how desperate you were. I remember thinking you were either the most honest person I'd ever met or the worst liar. Which was it? The most honest. And that terrified me, because I'd spent so long being careful about what I showed people that I'd forgotten what honesty looked like. And now? Now I'm trying to remember. You make it easier. Ethan took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I'm glad I got in the wrong car. Me too. They stayed out there until the cold drove them back inside, and when they left the gala an hour later, they left together. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just gone. In August, the board called another meeting. Ethan wasn't invited, but Vivian told him about it afterward, sitting in his new office with the door closed. "They want to make you VP of operations," she said. He stared at her. "What?" "The Southeast expansion is still outperforming projections. Your team's efficiency metrics are the highest in the company. They think you're ready for the next level." "That's a lot. I know." "Do you think I'm ready?" "I think you've been ready since the day you walked into that warehouse and solved a 2-month problem in 15 minutes. That's not an answer." "Yes, I think you're ready." He leaned back in his chair, processing. "What did you tell them?" "That I'd discuss it with you, that it's your decision. And if I say no, then you say no, no pressure." He looked at her, sitting across from him in her perfectly tailored suit, hair pulled back, looking every inch the CEO she was. "What do you want me to say?" he asked. "I want you to say what you actually want, not what you think I want to hear." "What if I don't know what I want?" "Then we figure it out, together." He thought about it. The promotion, the title, the responsibility, the way it would change things between them, make the power dynamic even more complicated than it already was. But he also thought about the work, the problems he could solve, the systems he could build, the difference he could make. "I want to do it," he said, "but I need to know we're okay, that this doesn't make things weird. It's already weird. We'll just be weird at a higher pay grade." He laughed. "Fair point. So you'll take it?" "Yeah, I'll take it." She smiled, and he saw relief in her expression. "Good, because I already told them you would." "Vivian, I know I'm terrible, but I also know you, and I knew you'd say yes." "Arrogant, confident, there's a difference." He stood up, walked around the desk, and kissed her. "Congratulations, Mr. Vice President," she said when they broke apart. "Thank you, Ms. CEO. We're a very professional couple." "Extremely. People are definitely going to talk. Let them." September came cool and crisp, and with it, the anniversary of the day Ethan had stumbled into Vivian's car. He didn't plan anything elaborate, just dinner, just the three of them. But when he mentioned it to Maya, she had other ideas. "We should do something special," she said. "Like what?" "I don't know, something big, because it's important." "It's just an anniversary, baby." "It's not just an anniversary. It's the day everything changed." She had a point. So Ethan called Vivian and asked if she was free that Saturday evening. "For what?" she asked. "It's a surprise." "I hate surprises." "You'll like this one." "Doubt it. Trust me." She sighed. "Fine. But if this involves a restaurant with a dress code, I'm out. No dress code. I promise." Saturday evening, he picked her up at 6, Maya bouncing in the back seat. "Where are we going?" Vivian asked, buckling her seatbelt. "You'll see." He drove through the city, past the familiar streets, past the corner where Vivian had picked him up a year ago, and finally pulled into a parking garage near the harbor. "Ethan, come on." He led them to an elevator, pressed the button for the top floor, and watched Vivian's face as she started to realize where they were going. The doors opened onto the rooftop, the same rooftop where they'd stood after the gala, where she'd admitted she didn't know how to do this, where he'd told her he was terrified too. But now the space was different. String lights hung overhead, glowing soft against the darkening sky. A small table sat near the railing, set for 3, and on the table, in a simple vase, were autumn leaves. Red and gold and orange. Vivian stopped, staring. "What is this?" she asked. "An anniversary," Ethan said. 1 year since I got in the wrong car and accidentally met the woman I'd end up falling in love with." Her breath caught. Maya ran over to the table, examining everything. "I helped pick the leaves." "They're perfect," Vivian said quietly. Ethan walked over, taking her hand. "I wanted to do something that mattered, that said thank you. Not just for taking a chance on me, but for taking a chance on us, on this whole messy, complicated thing we've built." "Ethan, let me finish." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Vivian's eyes went wide. "What are you—" "Psst. Relax. It's not what you think. Open it." She opened the box carefully, and inside were a pair of silver earrings. Simple, elegant, shaped like autumn leaves. "They're beautiful," she said. "I saw them last week and thought of you, of that day, of the corner where everything started. She looked at him, eyes bright. You're going to make me cry. Good. You need to cry more. It's humanizing. She laughed, watery and surprised, and pulled him into a kiss. Maya made a gagging sound from the table, and they broke apart, both smiling. Come on, Ethan said. Let's eat. They sat at the table, the three of them, and ate takeout from Ethan's favorite Italian place. They talked and laughed and watched the city light up below them as the sun set. And when dinner was done, Maya curled up on a blanket Ethan had brought, half asleep, while Ethan and Vivian stood at the railing. This year has been insane, Vivian said. Yeah, it has. I almost lost you 3 times. But you didn't. Only because you're stubborn. Takes one to know one. She smiled, leaning into him. I don't know what I did to deserve this. To deserve you. You took a chance. You let yourself want something outside of work. You chose to be human instead of perfect. I'm still not very good at it. You're better than you think. She looked up at him. I love you. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I know. And I love you too. Even when I'm terrible at being human? Especially then. She kissed him, and he kissed her back. And for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them and the city glowing below. When they pulled apart, Vivian glanced at Maya, asleep on the blanket. She was right, you know, Vivian said. About us. About all of it. She usually is. Think she'll let me stick around? I think she'd fight you if you tried to leave. Vivian laughed softly. Good, because I'm not planning on it. They stood there for a long time, the lights of Boston spreading out beneath them, the harbor dark and endless beyond. And Ethan thought about the day he'd climbed into the wrong car, desperate and broke and terrified of what came next. He thought about how one mistake, one wrong turn, one moment of chaos had led to this. To a woman who challenged him and loved him and made him better. To a daughter who was braver than he'd ever been. To a life that wasn't perfect but was real and messy and his. You know what the best part is? He said. What? This isn't the ending, it's just the beginning. Vivian smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made him believe in things he'd stopped believing in years ago. Yeah, she said. It is. Maya stirred on the blanket, and Vivian walked over, kneeling down beside her. Hey, sleepyhead, she said softly. Ready to go home? Maya blinked up at her. Are you coming with us? If that's okay with you. It's okay with me. Vivian helped her up, and Maya took her hand without hesitation. Ethan packed up the table, folded the blanket, and followed them to the elevator. As the doors closed and they descended back into the city, he looked at the two people beside him and felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like peace. Because maybe the point wasn't about having all the answers or making perfect choices or avoiding mistakes. Maybe the point was about showing up, about choosing to stay even when it was hard, about building something real with people who mattered. Maybe the point was about taking wrong turns and finding out they led you exactly where you needed to be. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped out into the parking garage, the three of them together. And Ethan thought, for the first time in a long time, that everything was going to be okay. Not perfect, not easy, but okay. And that was enough. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in December, Ethan woke up to find Vivian in his kitchen making pancakes. She'd stayed over more nights than not in the past few weeks, her presence becoming part of the rhythm of their lives. Her toothbrush in the bathroom, her work files on the kitchen table, her voice the last thing he heard before falling asleep, and the first thing he heard in the morning. Maya wandered out, rubbing her eyes. Vivian's making pancakes, she announced, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. They ate breakfast together, the three of them squeezed around the table, and Ethan watched Vivian help Maya with her homework afterward, explaining fractions in a way that actually made sense. Later, after Maya went to play in her room, Vivian pulled him aside. I've been thinking, she said. About what? About the fact that I spend more time here than at my own place. And maybe that's telling me something. His heart picked up. Like what? Like maybe it's time to stop pretending I don't want this to be permanent. Are you saying I'm saying I want to move in. If you'll have me. Ethan stared at her, and she looked nervous in a way he'd never seen before. "Are you sure?" he asked. "No, I'm terrified. But I'm sure about you, about us, about Maya, and I think that's enough." He pulled her close, and she melted into him. "Yeah," he said. "I'll have you." She laughed, relieved, and kissed him. Maya appeared in the doorway. "Are you moving in?" Vivian turned. "Is that okay with you?" Maya pretended to think about it. "Only if you keep making pancakes." "Deal." "Then it's okay." She ran back to her room, and Vivian looked at Ethan. "That was easy," she said. "She's been asking when you were going to move in for weeks." "Of course she has. She's smart like that, like her dad, and stubborn like you." Vivian smiled, and Ethan felt the last piece of something click into place, because this was it. This was the life he'd been fighting for without knowing what it looked like. Not perfect, not simple, but real. And built on a foundation of wrong turns and second chances and people brave enough to choose each other every single day. The kind of life worth keeping, the kind of life worth fighting for. The kind of life that started with one mistake on a rainy October morning and turned into everything that mattered.